The hangar was a cavern of steel and shadows, its high ceiling echoing faintly with the rhythmic tick of cooling metal from machines that had roared to life hours earlier. It was just after 0600 hours, and the air was thick with the familiar sense of hydraulic fluid, burnt oil, and the faint metallic tang of gunpowder residue that clung stubbornly to weapons even after cleaning. The place was never truly quiet. There was always the far-off hum of generators, the soft groan of shifting steel girders as the building adjusted to the rising desert heat. But in those early hours, the noise felt muted, almost respectful. Private Emily Carter worked alone in Bay 4, crouched beside the H-64 Apache she'd been assigned to service. The helicopter was a beast sleek in some ways, brutal in others. Even at rest, it radiated a kind of coiled power that made her skin prickle. Its matte paint drank in the fluorescent light overhead, giving off only the faintest sheen where the surface had been freshly wiped down. She'd been in the Army for 2 years, stationed here for 8 months, and she'd never quite gotten over the thrill of being allowed to work on these machines. As a mechanic, she wasn't the one flying them into danger, but she knew, absolutely knew, that every pilot trusted their life to her work. One missed detail, one careless bolt left loose, and someone could die. That weight kept her focused. This morning's task was straightforward. Inspect and clean the M230 chain gun mounted beneath the Apache's nose. It was a 30mm autocannon, capable of spitting out hundreds of rounds per minute, enough to tear through armored vehicles like tissue paper. Emily had done this job dozens of times, but she still handled the weapon with the same caution she would if it were loaded. She was methodical, wiping down the feed system, inspecting the barrel for microscopic fractures, checking the mount for signs of stress. A smudge of black grease streaked her cheek as she leaned in, turning the cleaning rod slowly inside the barrel. She worked with the steady rhythm of muscle memory, her thoughts drifting lazily toward nothing in particular. It was then that the patch caught the light. The fabric was stitched onto the upper sleeve of her right arm, an old habit from when she liked customizing her work coveralls with random finds from surplus stores. She'd picked up this particular patch in Arizona, in a dusty flea market off the highway. The vendor had been a leathery old man who claimed to have boxes of the real stuff, though Emily had assumed half of it was knockoff junk. This patch, with its sharp image of an eagle clutching arrows, had appealed to her mostly because it looked dramatic. She'd sewn it on without much thought. But this morning, as she leaned under the helicopter's nose, the patch caught a sliver of bright light from an overhead lamp, and the gold thread shimmered faintly against the deep olive fabric. She barely registered it until she heard the footsteps. They were crisp, deliberate, and carried the unmistakable cadence of someone with rank. Emily didn't need to look up to know it wasn't one of the other mechanics. Pilots moved differently, less like workers, more like men who carried responsibility in every step. She glanced up just as Captain Mark Hensley walked into Bay 4. He was in his late 30s, with close-cropped hair and the kind of face that looked carved from stone. His flight suit clung to him like a second skin, a helmet tucked under one arm. His eyes were hidden at first by the glare of the lights behind him, but as he stepped closer, she caught them sharp, blue, and assessing. Emily straightened automatically, offering a polite nod. "Morning, Captain." He didn't answer right away. His gaze had dropped, locking on her sleeve. For a moment, she thought he was looking at the grease smear on her arm, and she moved to brush it off. But then she noticed his expression. It wasn't irritation or mild disapproval. It was something colder, heavier. His jaw had tightened, the muscles working as if he were clenching back words. "Where did you get that?" he asked finally, his voice low. Emily blinked, following his gaze to the patch. "This?" She smiled faintly, a little embarrassed. "It's just something." I found in an old box of surplus beer. I liked the design. His boots stopped 3 feet from her. He didn't look at her face, only at the patch. That emblem, he said slowly, doesn't exist anymore. She gave a short laugh, thinking it was some sort of joke. Clearly it exists, Captain. I'm wearing it. That's when she noticed his knuckles, white against the helmet he still held in one hand. Hensley's tone didn't rise, but it sharpened, cutting through the ambient hum of the hangar. Private. That patch belonged to a unit that was dissolved over 20 years ago. A unit that officially never existed. Emily stared at him, unsure how to respond. She thought about the vendor in Arizona, the box of random military junk. Sir, I swear, He finally lifted his eyes to hers. There was no mistaking it now. Whatever that patch meant, it wasn't funny. And it wasn't just about army rules or dress code. You need to tell me exactly where you got it, he said, his voice quieter now, almost urgent. Her confusion deepened. It was a flea market, months ago. Some old guy selling patches and pins. I didn't think it was, but she didn't finish the sentence, because in that instant, Hensley's gaze flicked over her shoulder, past her, toward the far corner of the hangar. And Emily saw it two men, in plain clothes, leaning casually against a tool chest. She'd never seen them before. They weren't mechanics. They weren't pilots. They didn't even look like they belonged on base. But they were watching. Her and Hensley with the kind of interest that sent a cold ripple down her spine. She turned back to the captain, her voice barely above a whisper. Who are they? Hensley's jaw worked again, and then he shook his head, as if to cut the conversation short. Not here, he said. We need to move, now. The hum of the hangar seemed to drain away, replaced by a silence that was somehow heavier than noise. Emily stood still, her hand frozen mid-wipe against the chain gun's mount. The sharp smell of solvent and oil hung in the air, but she barely noticed. Her eyes kept darting between Captain Hensley's face and the 2 men lingering in the far corner. Hensley's gaze didn't waver from the patch. His expression had shifted into something unreadable, part calculation, part. Was that fear? No, not exactly fear. Recognition. Deep, unsettling recognition. That emblem, he said finally. His voice low, but with an edge that cut straight through the distance between them. Isn't supposed to exist anymore. Emily tried for a smile, hoping to diffuse whatever strange tension was building. You're making it sound like I dug it up from a war grave, sir. It's just a patch. Found it at a flea market. Thought it looked cool. His eyes flicked up to hers, and for the first time she noticed the strain there, as if 1,000 thoughts were grinding behind his stare. Cool, he repeated softly, like the word tasted wrong. Private Carter, that symbol belonged to a covert reconnaissance unit during the Gulf War. Officially, it was never formed. The men who wore it, every last one either went deep black ops or didn't come home at all. The way he said it made goosebumps prickle along her arms. Okay, she said slowly. So it's rare. Why does that matter? I didn't steal it, if that's what you're thinking. That's not the point, he said sharply, then lowered his tone again when her eyes flicked toward the other men. You shouldn't even have that in your possession. Hell, it shouldn't be in public hands at all. Whoever gave it to you, whether you knew it or not, just put you in the middle of something you don't understand. Emily swallowed, trying to gauge if he was exaggerating. Hensley wasn't known for dramatics. Pilots in his position didn't have time for that. But there was something about the way his shoulders stayed tense, his hand gripping his helmet tighter with each word. That told her this wasn't a story he was spinning for effect. Sir, she began, I swear, I bought it from some old... Don't, he cut her off. Don't tell me here, not with them listening. Her stomach tightened. She couldn't help herself, She glanced back toward the corner. Eh? Two men were still there, leaning against the tool chest like they belonged. But their eyes, they weren't just watching idly. They were measuring, taking in every twitch of movement, every syllable. One of them caught her looking and smiled. Not friendly, but slow, deliberate. The smile said, "Yes, we see you, and we're not in any hurry." A faint, metallic clink echoed in the bay as a wrench rolled off a nearby workbench. The sound startled her more than it should have. Hensley took a step closer, speaking so low, now she had to lean in to catch the words over the faint drone of the hangar's fans. "We're leaving. Grab whatever you've got and move." She blinked. Leaving? Where? Somewhere we can talk without eyes and ears crawling all over us. "Aye, Captain. I'm in the middle of—" "Now, Private," he said, and the steel in his tone left no room for argument. Still, habit made her glance toward the sergeant's office at the far end of the hangar, half expecting to see someone stop them. But no one came. The few other crew members in sight seemed to be keeping their heads down, studiously avoiding any interaction. It was like the air around her, and Hensley had suddenly become a zone no one wanted to enter. She wiped her hands quickly on a rag, slung her tool belt over her shoulder, and followed him. His strides were purposeful, but not hurried fast enough to get moving, slow enough not to look like they were running from something. She could feel the eyes of those two men tracking them as they crossed the bay. The urge to look back again was almost unbearable. She didn't. They stepped out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the tarmac. The sudden heat slammed into her, the air already shimmering above the concrete despite the early hour. The Apache they'd been working on wasn't far away. Its blade still, its shadow sharp against the ground. Hensley didn't break stride toward it. "Wait," Emily said, quickening her pace to keep up. "We're flying?" He gave a short, grim nod. "Easiest way to make sure we're not followed. What about clearance? Logs? Flight plans?" "Not logging this one," he said flatly. "It won't exist." Her mouth went dry. She'd never heard of just taking a helicopter up without authorization. Not unless it was an emergency scramble, and even then there was protocol. What he was suggesting was the kind of thing that got careers ended, and yet he was doing it with the calm certainty of someone who had no intention of asking permission. They reached the helicopter. Hensley tossed his helmet onto the pilot's seat and began a rapid pre-flight check, his movements clipped and precise. Emily hesitated, glancing back toward the hangar doors. That's when she saw it. The two men had stepped out into the sunlight, not rushing, just following. They didn't look at each other, didn't speak, but their steps were perfectly in sync. They weren't even pretending to be casual now. Her heart kicked into a higher gear. "They're coming," she said. "I know," Hensley replied, not looking up from the controls. "Get in." She climbed into the second seat, strapping in. Her hands fumbled on the harness clip, partly from nerves, partly from the adrenaline spike flooding her system. The men were maybe 30 yards away now. The one who had smiled earlier adjusted something at his hip, a holster. The helicopter's engines roared to life, rotors beginning their slow, heady rotation. The air churned hot and dusty around them. Hensley slipped on his helmet, voice coming through her headset, calm but urgent. "Don't say anything until we're clear of base. And don't take that patch off." "What? Why not?" "Because," he said, pulling the collective lever, "it's the only thing keeping you alive right now." Her mind whirled, trying to process what that meant, but before she could ask, the Apache lifted from the ground in a smooth surge, the world tilting beneath them. Through the side window, she caught one last glimpse of the two men standing in the tarmac, swirling dust, watching them rise. Neither raised a hand to wave. Neither showed any frustration at being left behind. They just stood there and smiled. The Apache's rotors thundered against the sky, a heavy rhythmic beat that pulsed through Emily's chest. The base was already shrinking beneath them, a spread of gray hangars and asphalt fading into the desert's pale expanse. The only thing sharper than the sunlight was the pounding in her temples. For several minutes, neither she nor Hensley spoke. His focus was fixed on the controls, eyes scanning instruments and horizon with the precision of someone who knew distractions could kill. Emily stared out the side window, the wind-torn world blurring past until the tension in her body became unbearable. She clicked her headset mic. "Okay, Captain. You've got me in the air. No clearance, and probably breaking a dozen regulations. Can you tell me now what's going on?" His voice came through clipped, even over the comms. "First thing, you need to know those two men back there weren't from this base, and they weren't here for me. They were here for you." She laughed once, incredulous. "Me? I'm a mechanic. I fix things. Nobody comes for me." "That patch says otherwise," Hensley said. Emily glanced at her sleeve, the embroidered eagle clutching arrows, its edges frayed from years of wear. "You said it was from some unit. A reconnaissance thing?" He nodded, eyes still on the horizon. "Not just a reconnaissance thing. Officially, it never existed. Off the record, it was one of the most specialized detachments in the Army during the Gulf War. They weren't frontline fighters. They went in before anyone else. Gathered intel, sabotaged enemy equipment, sometimes extracted. People the government wanted." "Wanted?" she asked. His tone turned harder. "High-value targets, scientists, commanders, defectors. Sometimes they didn't come back. Sometimes the people they went for didn't either." Emily shivered despite. "The cockpit's heat. And my patch is from them?" "It's not just from them," Hensley said. He paused, his next words heavier. "That particular patch design, the gold thread in the eagle's wings, the triple arrow variant that was issued to a single mission team in late '91, the last mission they ever took." She frowned. "What happened to them?" "No official report. My father was the team leader." The words landed like a weight in her stomach. "Your father?" "Yeah," he said, voice flat. "Captain Jonathan Hensley. He led a 6-man detachment into Iraqi territory to secure a piece of experimental tech, a prototype guidance system the Pentagon thought could change the balance of air warfare. They never came back. Every family got the same line: killed in. Action remains unrecoverable. End of story." Emily's eyes drifted back to the patch. "But this means?" "It means either someone found one of their bodies and stripped it, or he cut himself off." "Or what?" she pressed. He exhaled sharply through his nose. "Or someone wants you to think they did, which means you've been marked." "Marked?" Her voice cracked on the word. "For what?" "I didn't even know this thing existed until you freaked out about it." "That's how they work," Hensley said. "You don't know. They make sure of it. They pass you something, an object, a message, a token, and just wait for you to walk into the right place where someone notices. Then the pieces start moving." Emily's mouth went dry. "You think that's what happened here? That old guy in Arizona was part of this?" "I think," Hensley said, "that the day you bought that patch, someone started a clock, and now it's run out of time." She looked down at her hands in her lap, knuckles pale against the harness straps. The Apache's engine noise suddenly felt oppressive, pressing against her ears. "And those two men?" she asked quietly. "They knew the patch," Hensley said, "and they were waiting to see who wore it. My guess, they weren't planning to take you on base too messy. But the moment you left, they'd follow, corner you somewhere quiet, make you disappear." Emily's pulse thudded in her throat. So what now? Now, he said, we put some distance between us and them, and we figure out who's pulling the strings. Because if this is connected to my father's last mission, there's more at play than just an old piece of fabric. She wanted to ask why it mattered so much to him, but she already knew. If her family had been told nothing but a line in a report for decades, and then something surfaced that might lead to the truth, she'd probably risk breaking rules too. Still, another question itched at her. If this unit was so secret, how do you know about it? For the first time since they'd taken off, Hensley looked at her directly. His eyes were ice blue and unblinking. Because I was 12 years old, when a man I'd never seen before showed up at our door. He gave my mother a folded flag and told her my father died a hero. Then he leaned down and told me quiet enough so she couldn't hear that one day. Someone might try to finish his mission. And if they did, I'd know by the patch. Emily stared, stunned. And you think I'm part of that? I think, he said slowly, you just stumbled into a 24-year-old operation that was never meant to see daylight again. Silence settled between them again, heavier this time. The Apache drone gone, carrying them deeper into the desert. Below, the earth stretched out in cracked ochre and beige, dotted with jagged rock outcrops. From up here, it looked empty dead, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in that expanse, people were watching. Finally, she spoke. Captain, if your father's mission never ended, what was it really about? Hensley's jaw tightened. That's what I'm going to find out. And right now, you're my only lead. Emily turned back to the window, the patch on her sleeve warm from the sunlight. It was strange before this morning. It had been nothing but a scrap of cloth, something she'd stitched on to give her work coveralls a little character. Now it felt like a weight she couldn't take off. Below, the desert stretched toward the horizon, endless and unforgiving. Somewhere far behind them, at a base they could no longer return to, two men were watching their escape, smiling like they already knew how this would end. The hangar had grown quiet, almost too quiet for comfort. Maria remained in the maintenance bay, her hands trembling ever so slightly as she reached for the tools. The patch still clung to the Apache's frame, hidden from casual glances, but now glowing in the pilot's mind like a warning flare. Captain Daniels stood just a few feet away, pretending to inspect a maintenance log, but his eyes were locked on her. He had recognized that patch instantly, not because of its shape, but because it wasn't a patch issued by the U.S. military. It was an insignia he had seen only once before, in a grainy intelligence photograph from an incident in Afghanistan 8 years ago. The emblem belonged to a shadowy unit no one admitted existed. Maria, he began slowly, his voice steady but probing. Where did you get that? She froze mid-motion, her wrench clicking softly against the fuselage. For a moment, she didn't answer. It's just something I picked up, she said, without looking at him. That's not something you just pick up, Daniels countered, his voice dropping lower. I've been in this business long enough to know that patch has a history. Maria finally turned to face him. Her eyes, calm but unreadable, held a strange intensity. And I've been in this business long enough to know some histories aren't worth digging into. The air between them thickened. Outside, the sound of a distant helicopter echoed across the tarmac, but here in the hangar, time felt frozen. Daniels wanted to press further, but he also knew that forcing an answer from someone like Maria could be dangerous, not just for her, but for him. He tried a different angle. Listen, if there's something I need to know, if that patch means you're in trouble, I can help. She let out a short, humorless laugh. Help? Captain, the kind of trouble tied to this patch doesn't get helped. It gets buried. Daniel's stomach tightened. He had a dozen questions, but Maria had already turned back to her work, her hands moving with the practiced precision of someone used to shutting the world out. That night, Daniels couldn't sleep. He lay in his small quarters, the image of that patch burned into his thoughts. He opened his encrypted laptop and typed a search into the secure database, Unit 7 Black Insignia. Only one classified. Report surfaced, marked Top Secret, Eyes Only. The file detailed an operation gone wrong in Helmand Province. A covert U.S. and allied unit had been tasked with intercepting a high-value insurgent convoy. But something happened, something never explained in the report. The operation ended with 14 people dead, none of them insurgents, and 3 members of Unit 7 disappearing without a trace. The insignia on the patch was photographed from one of the missing soldiers' uniforms. Daniel sat back, a chill creeping over him. If Maria had that patch, she was either connected to one of those missing operatives, or she was one of them. But how could that be? She didn't look old enough to have been in the field 8 years ago. The next morning, he found her already in the hangar, running her fingers over the Apache's .50 caliber machine gun as if she was feeling for imperfections invisible to the eye. He decided to test her. "You ever been to Afghanistan?" he asked casually. Her hands paused for just a fraction of a second. Not enough for most people to notice, but Daniels did. "Once," she replied, eyes still on the weapon. "But not the way you think." "What way, then?" She didn't answer. Instead, she shifted the subject. "You ever wonder why some stories never make it to the news?" Daniels studied her, realizing that every word she spoke seemed calculated, not to reveal, but to control the direction of the conversation. She was deflecting, but not out of fear. It was almost like she was testing him too. Later that day, Daniels received a secure call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was gravelly and direct. "Captain Daniels, stop asking about the patch. Consider this your first and final warning." The line went dead before Daniels could respond. That night, Maria was nowhere to be found. Her quarters were empty, her ID badge left on the desk. Daniels searched the base quietly, not wanting to trigger an official alert. He found her near the far end of the airfield, standing in the shadows beside a parked maintenance truck. "You shouldn't be here," she said without turning around. "Neither should you," he replied. She sighed, then glanced over her shoulder. "You're persistent, Captain. That's good for a pilot, bad for someone who wants to stay alive." Daniels took a step closer. "If you're in danger, you don't have to face it alone." Maria's eyes softened for a brief moment, as if she wanted to believe him. Then, almost reluctantly, she spoke. "The patch isn't about me. It's about what I saw. And what I saw is the kind of thing that can take down entire governments if it ever came out." Daniels felt a cold weight settle in his gut. Before he could ask more, headlights swept across the tarmac, a military jeep approaching fast. Maria's expression hardened. "We'll talk when it's safe," she said, slipping into the darkness before the jeep arrived. The vehicle stopped beside Daniels, and a man in plain clothes stepped out. His badge wasn't military, it was intelligence. Without a word, he handed Daniels a sealed envelope and drove off. Inside was a single photo. Maria, standing beside 2 men in combat gear, all 3 wearing the same patch. The timestamp read Helmand Province, -2017, and on the back, in neat handwriting, were the words, "If she talks, they'll come for both of you." The base's night air carried that faint tang of desert dust, the kind that crept into every crevice of machinery and skin alike. Under the floodlights, the Apache sat in its designated bay, looming like a crouched predator waiting for the dawn. Inside the hangar, the mechanics had mostly finished for the day, leaving the space quieter than usual. Staff Sergeant Maria Ria Sanchez was the last one on duty. She stood on a portable platform beside the Apache's M230 chain gun, wiping the last traces of carbon from its barrel. Her hands moved in practiced precision, but her mind was somewhere else on that pilot, Captain Derek Hawley, and the strange frozen look he'd given her earlier that week when his eyes landed on the old, fraying patch sewn to her coveralls. The patch wasn't standard issue. It was an old, subdued emblem of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment Night Stalkers worn, faded, and clearly personal. She never talked about it. Most assumed it was a family memento. She let them believe that. A faint metallic clink pulled her from her thoughts. It didn't come from her tools. Rhea froze, scanning the hangar shadows. "Who's there?" She called, her voice steady, but her eyes narrowed. No answer. She climbed down from the platform, her boots clicking softly against the concrete. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint hum of an overhead lamp. As she rounded the nose of the Apache, she caught a flicker of movement near the far service door. A tall man stepped into the light dressed in civilian clothes, but his posture screamed military. His hair was short, his jawline sharp, and his eyes sharp enough to slice through steel. "You clean that gun like someone who's used it." "Before," he said, his voice deep, almost amused. Rhea kept her stance neutral. "Maintenance is part of my job, sir. You lost?" He didn't smile, not even a little. "That patch you wear, where'd you get it?" Her heart skipped, but she forced her expression to remain blank. "Gift from someone I knew a long time ago." He stepped closer. "That someone wouldn't happen to be Chief Warrant Officer Luis Sanchez, would it?" The air between them tightened. Hearing her father's name full, precise after so many years, was like having the wind knocked out of her. "Who are you?" she demanded. The man glanced at the Apache, then back at her. "Name's Mason. I flew with your father. The day he didn't come back." She didn't speak. The memories she'd locked away for over a decade started pressing against her chest. The grainy news clip, the folded flag, the unanswered questions, they all came rushing back. "I saw you the other day," Mason continued. "Saw the way." Captain Hawley reacted. He recognized that patch because he knows the story, or at least the version he was told. But that's not the whole truth. Rhea's fingers tightened around the rag in her hand. "And you think you have the truth?" Mason's gaze didn't waver. "I know I do. And I think Hawley needs to hear it, whether he likes it or not." Before she could answer, the hangar's side door opened, and Captain Hawley himself walked in, still in his flight suit. His eyes went from Rhea to Mason in an instant, and his body stiffened. "Mason," Hawley said flatly. "Didn't think I'd see you again." "Didn't think you'd still be avoiding me," Mason replied. Rhea stepped back slightly, looking between them. "You two know each other?" "Long story," Hawley muttered, his jaw clenched. "One you don't want to get pulled into." Mason's eyes darkened. "She's already in it, whether you want her to be or not. The truth about her father, it's not in any official report. And you, Captain, have been carrying that truth for far too long." The tension in the hangar became almost physical, like the air itself was pressing down. Rhea looked at Hawley. "What's he talking about?" Hyle's gaze shifted away, but Mason stepped forward. "Your father didn't die in an accident. He died because of a decision made in the cockpit that day, a decision Hawley was part of." Her pulse hammered in her ears. "Is that true?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Hawley didn't answer right away. His shoulders squared, but he didn't meet her eyes. "It's not that simple." "Then make it simple," she shot back. Mason glanced at her. "If you really want to hear it, you'll need to come with me. I have files, recordings, things you've never seen." The captain's voice turned hard. "You show her those, Mason, and you'll be violating more than Just protocol. You'll be crossing into dangerous ground. Dangerous for who? Mason countered. Ria's gaze moved between them, her mind racing. She'd spent years avoiding the painful gap in her past, telling herself the truth didn't matter anymore. But now two men, one from her father's past, and one she saw almost every day, stood here, holding pieces of it in their hands. She didn't know who to trust. Finally, she said, "I'll hear it, both of you, together." Neither man looked happy with that arrangement, but neither objected. Halle finally nodded once. Tomorrow. Off base. No uniforms, no weapons. We? Talk, and that's it. Mason's expression was unreadable. Fine, but you'd better be ready for what you're going to hear, Sergeant. Some truths can't be untold. The three of them stood in the hangar's dim light, the Apache looming. Behind them, like a silent witness, the chain gun Ria had been cleaning was forgotten, its metal glinting faintly, as if waiting for the next shot to be fired, not on a battlefield, but in whatever battle was about to unfold between them. Outside, the desert wind picked up, rattling the loose panels on the hangar walls. Somewhere far off, a distant rumble echoed thunder, or maybe something else. One thing was certain. Tomorrow was going to change everything. The sun hung low over the Arizona desert, bleeding orange into the dusty horizon. Amelia's boots crunched on gravel as she and Captain Hayes followed the GPS coordinates forwarded by the Pentagon's secure line. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of unanswered questions pressing down on her. She replayed the moment the patch was found in her mind, the faded insignia with the cryptic symbols and that name, Phoenix Watch, a secret squadron, officially erased from history. Yet here it was, resurfacing through an old, grease-stained piece of cloth in an Apache hangar. Hayes moved with the quiet precision of a soldier who'd seen too much to be startled anymore. But Amelia could sense the tension in his shoulders. "This is too exposed," Hayes muttered, scanning the desert with his binoculars. "If someone wanted to make us disappear, this is the perfect place to do it." Amelia stopped. "So why are we walking right into it?" His eyes didn't leave the horizon. "Because sometimes the only way to find the truth is to bait it out." The wind picked up, carrying the dry scent of mesquite. They reached the rusted remains of what looked like an abandoned radar station. Just 3 warped towers, a crumbling shack, and silence so deep it made Amelia's heartbeat feel loud. Then she saw it. A black duffel bag rested in the center of the cracked concrete, placed with deliberate precision. A single manila envelope sat on top. No footprints, no tire tracks, as if it had simply appeared. Hayes raised a hand, motioning for her to stay back, but Amelia's curiosity burned hotter than caution. She edged closer, her pulse in her ears. The envelope bore the same insignia as the patch. Inside were photographs, old, grainy, and chilling. Apache helicopters painted black, flying without identification markings. Men in untraceable uniforms standing beside crates marked with foreign scripts. But one photo made her knees weaken. It was her father. Not in his army fatigues, but in black Phoenix watch gear, standing beside a man Amelia didn't recognize. Except for one detail, the same scar across his cheek she had seen on a man tailing her in Tucson 2 days earlier. Her breath hitched. "Hayes, my dad," she didn't finish. A sharp click echoed in the air, the sound of a rifle bolt locking into place. Hayes' voice was calm but low. "Don't move." From the ridge above, figures emerged, rifles aimed. 3, maybe 4. They moved with the efficiency of trained operatives. "Put the envelope down," one marked. Amelia's mind spun. Whoever they were, they hadn't come to talk. The duffel was still unopened, sitting like a silent dare in the middle of the clearing. Hayes subtly shifted his stance, calculating angles, distances. Amelia caught the flicker of his hand near his sidearm, but the men on the ridge were too well positioned. Then a shadow passed overhead. At first she thought it was a bird, but the growing whup-whup of rotor blades told her otherwise. The sound swelled until the very ground seemed to vibrate. A black Apache helicopter swept in low, its silhouette blotting out the setting sun. No markings, just like in the photographs. The armed men didn't flinch. Instead, they lowered their rifles slightly, as if expecting its arrival. The side door opened, and a man stepped into view, tall, broad-shouldered, his face hidden behind tinted goggles and a helmet. But Amelia knew. Even before he removed the helmet, she recognized the jawline, the way he stood. Her throat closed. It was him, her father. The wind from the rotors tore at her hair, dust stinging her eyes. She wanted to run to him, to scream questions, but the look on his face stopped her cold. There was no warmth, no relief. Just something hard, calculating. He said nothing. He simply looked at her, then at Hayes, then at the patch clutched in Amelia's hand. His eyes flicked to the armed men, who immediately moved forward. Hayes stepped in front of her. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice like steel. Her father's jaw tightened. "The mistake?" he finally spoke, his voice deep and unfamiliar. "Was you not walking away when you had the chance?" Before Amelia could speak, the men seized her arms. Hayes fought back, quick, brutal, taking 2 down before a rifle butt slammed into his ribs. The last thing Amelia saw before a black hood dropped over her head was the duffel being loaded into the Apache. The envelope, and every answer it held, was gone. The helicopter lifted off, its shadow stretching long across the desert, leaving behind nothing but dust and the fading echo of rotor blades. Amelia's mind burned with questions, but one thought screamed above the rest. If her father was alive, why was he working for Phoenix Watch? And why did he look at her? Like an enemy? The hangar was eerily quiet that night, except for the occasional echo of footsteps from the far end where the security patrol made its rounds. Rebecca stood near the Apache, her hands resting lightly on the cold steel of the machine gun she had cleaned earlier. She had been avoiding Michael all day, not because she didn't want to talk to him, but because she wasn't ready for what might come out in that conversation. Michael, on the other hand, had spent hours in his office, staring at the small photograph he had found folded behind Rebecca's locker door earlier that week. It showed a much younger Rebecca, standing beside a man in uniform same patch on his arm as the one he had spotted the first night. The man in the photo was smiling, his hand on Rebecca's shoulder. Michael's gut told him the truth, but his mind refused to jump to conclusions without hearing her side. At precisely 23:17, Rebecca heard the sound of heavy boots approaching. She turned, and there he was, Michael, his face unreadable, his eyes searching hers. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice low but steady. "I've been busy," she replied, her tone guarded. "That patch," Michael began, stepping closer. "It's not just any insignia. I've been asking around quietly. Only one unit wore it, and only one mission comes to mind." Rebecca's breath caught, but she said nothing. "I think I know who you really are," he continued, lowering his voice further. "And I think you've been lying to everyone here, but not for the reason most would assume." Her gaze dropped to the floor. "You think you know," she whispered, "but you don't know the half of it." Michael glanced toward the security cameras. "We can't talk here. Too many eyes." Without waiting for her answer, he turned and started walking toward the far exit, the one that led to the old maintenance building no one used anymore. Rebecca hesitated for only a moment before following him. The air inside the maintenance building was stale, and dust motes floated in the beams of moonlight slipping through cracked windows. Michael shut the door behind them. Tell me, he demanded softly. Rebecca leaned against the workbench, her fingers gripping the edge tightly. The man in that photo, he wasn't just some soldier. He was my brother, my twin. He was part of an operation that went sideways in the desert. An Apache gunship was involved. He died that night. Michael's jaw tightened. And the patch? It's all I have left of him, she said, her voice trembling. When I joined the crew here, I never expected to see it again. On your Apache, on your flight logs. I recognized the serial number of your bird the first day I saw it. It was there. That exact gunship was the one covering his last mission. Michael froze, the weight of her words sinking in. Rebecca, I was the pilot that night. The silence that followed was crushing. Her eyes searched his, trying to read his soul. Then you were there when... She cut herself off, unable to finish. I remember every detail, Michael admitted. We were ordered to hold position, but the ground team was exposed. I did everything I could, but we couldn't get to him. In time, Rebecca looked away, blinking back tears. I spent years wondering if anyone on that gunship cared, or if it was just another day in the cockpit for you. It wasn't, he said firmly, stepping closer. I've carried the faces of that day with me every single night since. I didn't know his name. I didn't know you, until now. For the first time since they met, Rebecca saw something raw in Michael's eyes, a mixture of guilt, grief, and an unshakable determination to make things right. I need you to understand, she said quietly. I didn't come here to blame you. I came because I wanted answers. I wanted to see the machine that was there that day, to understand what happened, and maybe to forgive it. Michael's throat tightened. Then let me show you the whole truth. There's a part of that mission file you've never seen. It's classified, but I can get it. Rebecca's eyes widened. That would cost you your career. Some things are worth more than a career, he replied without hesitation. For the next hour, they pored over maps, coordinates, and mission notes spread across the dusty workbench. Michael explained the tactical decisions, the comms blackouts, the split-second calls that still haunted him. Rebecca listened, sometimes questioning, sometimes silent, but always with that same intensity. By the time they finished, the clock was pushing 2 o'clock. Michael leaned back, exhausted, but lighter than he had felt in years. I don't know where this leaves us, Rebecca admitted. But I believe you. That's enough for now, Michael said, a faint smile touching his lips. But there's one more thing you should know, something I've never told anyone. Rebecca tilted her head. What's that? He took a deep breath. Your brother didn't just die in that mission. He saved my life, twice. Once in the field, and once long after he was gone. Because without him, I wouldn't have met you. For the first time that night, Rebecca smiled, just a little. And in that quiet, dusty room, something shifted between them. The mission, the patch, the years of unanswered questions. They weren't gone, but they were no longer walls. They were the beginning of a bridge. The desert dawn broke cold and clear as Rebecca and Michael stood by the Apache, the heavy metal beast gleaming faintly beneath the pale morning light. Their night-long conversation had peeled back layers of pain and secrets neither expected to confront, yet here they were, standing at the crossroads of past and future. Rebecca's fingers brushed the patch stitched onto her coveralls, the worn eagle that had set this whole journey in motion. The symbol was no longer just a relic. It was a key to truth, a marker of sacrifice, and a reminder that some stories refused to stay buried. Michael's voice was quiet but steady. There's one more thing. The patch isn't just a symbol. It's a code. Rebecca frowned. A code? He nodded, pulling out a small weathered notebook from his flight bag. On the back of the original patch her brother wore, there was a hidden pattern woven into the stitching coordinates. Not just any coordinates, but the location of the experimental technology they were supposed to secure. Her breath hitched. The technology from the mission? Yes, the tech that was never found. That mission was about more than just extraction. It was about preventing something dangerous from falling into the wrong hands. The weight of the revelation settled over Rebecca like a storm. So, the patch was a map all along? Michael smiled faintly. Exactly. But only those who knew where to look could decode it. They traced the coordinates together, then compared them to satellite images Michael had pulled from classified archives. The location was a remote canyon deep in the Arizona wilderness, marked only by a faded symbol on old military topography maps. "I'm going," Rebecca said, determination sharpening her voice. Michael reached for her hand. "I'm coming with you." This ends here. The journey to the canyon was arduous. The heat of the day bore down on them as they navigated rugged terrain, relying on Michael's military training and Rebecca's intuition. Every step forward felt like walking deeper into a secret world where the past and present collided. Finally, they reached a narrow cave mouth hidden beneath overgrown brush. Inside, the air was cool and musty. Their flashlights danced over walls, etched with fading symbols, old military markings, and remnants of equipment long abandoned. At the cave's heart lay a rusted metal crate, half buried in dust and cobwebs. Rebecca's hands trembled as she pried it open, revealing an array of advanced, compact devices, prototypes of guidance systems, encrypted data drives, and classified documents that could rewrite history. Michael picked up a faded photo from the crate, his eyes misting. It was a picture of their unit, smiling amidst the desert sands, young, hopeful, unaware of the fate that awaited them. Suddenly, a noise echoed behind them. Footsteps, soft, purposeful. They spun around just in time to see shadows emerge from the cave's entrance, government operatives, sent to retrieve the stolen secrets and silence those who knew too much. Rebecca's heart pounded. The moment of reckoning was here. With quick thinking, Michael sealed the crate and activated a hidden distress beacon. Their extraction was moments away. "We're not letting this end in silence," Rebecca said, fiercely. "They deserve to be remembered." As the operatives closed in, the whoop-whoop of helicopter blades approached. This time their ride was no longer an enemy, but a rescue. Allies who believed in truth and justice. Rebecca and Michael ascended, the crate secured, the patch gleaming proudly on her arm. The sun set behind them, bathing the desert in gold. In that moment, the patch was no longer a symbol of loss or secrecy. It was a beacon, a promise that no story, no sacrifice would be forgotten.